any negative reactions to the murder? Yes. Could you give an example? People wanted to kill me after. How did you find out people wanted to kill you? From other blazers in the neighborhood, Corey. What did you learn from Corey Brown? He told me to be careful for Venom's brothers because they was looking for me. And what did you learn from other sex money murder members in the neighborhood? Be careful for basically his brothers and people we hang out with. Are you familiar with an individual known as Gambino? Yes. Who is he? He is the person on top of the lineup for the New York State prisons. So to be clear, is he in sex money murder? Yeah. Did you learn of his reaction to the murder? He made me a plate after. How did you learn that? From Brabs' younger brother. I was in prison with him, and he told me that. He said I was a plate. Is Brabs' younger brother in a gang? Yes. What gang? Sex money murder. All right. Mr. Lopez, I'd like to... Actually, stepping back for a second, did you ever have a conversation with Corey Brown about Gambino? One time he called on his phone, but it wasn't Gambino himself. It was somebody that was under Gambino. And we was all hanging out, and he put it on speaker, and basically he was saying that, yo, C-Stacks is a dub. It's f***ed up. Excuse me. That's messed up how he did that to Venom. And we was all there. I remember Corey telling him, like, to mind their business. They don't know what's going on in the streets. He was worried about what was going on in jail. They're miserable because they got all that time. So that's why they're running their mouth. So just to be clear, who was saying that you were a dub? Someone that was under Gambino. But the message came from Gambino. How did you learn about this conversation? I was present for that conversation. And what did you understand Corey to be saying when he said they were all miserable in jail? They had a lot of time in jail, and they just wanted to start trouble. How did you react when Corey said this? I just stood quiet and was listening. All right, Mr. Lopez, I'd like to change topics a bit. You testified earlier that you were involved in selling crack in Castle Hill. Yes. How did you start selling crack in Castle Hill? I used to hang out with JC, and he made me an offer, just come up here and start selling crack with him in Castle Hill. When did that happen? Around 2012. Was this before or after the murder of Vincent Davis? Before. How did you know JC? Went to school together. Was anybody else selling crack in Castle Hill? D.O., Brabs. How did you know D.O.? I met him around 2009. Where did you meet him? In prison. When you met him in prison, was he in a gang? Yes. What gang? He was Mac Baller Brim. Did you ever discuss whether he was in a gang before he was with Mac Baller Brims? He told me he used to be sex money murder. And to be clear, when you were dealing drugs with him, beginning in 2011, what gang was he in? Sex money murder. And I believe, did you also testify that you were selling drugs with Brabs? Yes. How did you know Brabs? I met him when I was in jail too. Were these all sex money murder members? Yes. Was there a particular place in Castle Hill where you were selling drugs? In the projects. Where in the projects? The whole projects. Would you sell them outside or inside? Mostly inside. Were non-sex money murder members selling drugs in Castle Hill? No. Why not? There was basically only sex money murder that was selling crack. Did you and D.O. ever discuss the control of the drug trade in Castle Hill? He told me that him and JC was in control of Castle Hill. Did he say how he got that control? I can't remember. What did it mean for him and JC to be in control of the drug trade there? Basically that they had the block and they was in charge. What did it mean for them to be in charge? They ran it. They ran Castle Hill projects. Around this time, how often were you selling drugs in Castle Hill? Every day. How long did you sell drugs in Castle Hill every day? Until about September 2012. So just to be clear, when did you begin selling drugs in 2012? Around spring? Do you know what month? Probably around May. During this time frame, how often would you see D.O. or Jamel Rodriguez selling drugs? Every day. What about J.C.? Every day. What about Brabs? Every day. How much crack cocaine were you selling a day? Maybe. Each day? Or we could say a week. A week, maybe 5 to 10 grams. Do you know how much D.O. was selling? No. Was he selling more than you? Objection. Overruled. Well, form. Sustained. Do you know if D.O. was selling more than you? I'm not sure. How often did you see D.O. selling? Every day. What quantities did he have when you saw him? Objection. Repetitive. Overruled. About. We used to bag up and had little dimes of crack and maybe about 5 to 10 grams at a time. What is a dime of crack? About 0.3 of a gram, a third of a gram. And how many dimes of crack would you have a day? Maybe 50, 40. Would you be able to sell them all that day? Most of the time. How many dimes of crack would you see D.O. with generally a day? About the same. What about J.C.? Same. What about Brabs? Same. Who was supplying you with the crack cocaine? I used to buy off this dude named Bounce. And when you bought the drugs from Bounce, was the crack cocaine cooked or in powder form? Cooked. What did it look like? Like a rock? Like a big rock? How much would you get from Bounce at a time? Anywhere from 5 or 10 grams. How often would you re-up your supply with Bounce? About once or twice a week. Who would package the crack cocaine? I would. Where would you do that? In certain trap houses in Castle Hill. Did you ever see D.O. package crack cocaine? Yes. What about J.C.? Yes. What about Brabs? Yes. Aside from Bounce, did you have any other suppliers during this time? I got one time from the God. How much did you get from the God? He gave me about an ounce of crack. And how many grams are there in an ounce of crack, approximately? 28. Do you know who was supplying D.O. with drugs? He used to go with me to get the same drugs from Bounce. Do you know how often D.O. was re-upping with Bounce? About the same, once or twice a week. And generally speaking, what kind of customers did you have? Addicts. What about D.O.? Same. Did you share customers with D.O.? Yes. What about with J.C. and Brabs? Yes. How did that work? Might all be hanging out with each other, and if an addict had called one of our phones, and if he wanted 6, we might split it half and half. I'll give him 3 jobs, and he give him 3 jobs, and vice versa. During this time, did D.O. have a cell phone? Yes. How many phones? 2. Did he use a particular phone for drug dealing? Yes. What kind of phone was that? It would be like a throwaway phone. So what did it look like? Like either a flip phone? What did his other phone look like? An iPhone? Did you ever use D.O.'s phone? Sometimes. Which phone? The dirty phone that we would sell drugs off of? Why would you use his phone? If he was leaving the neighborhood, he would leave his phone with me, and I used his customers while he wasn't there. What do you mean, used his customers? I would sell crack to the customers that would call his phone. So how would you know that a customer was calling his phone? They would call, and it would ring, and I would answer it. What would they ask when they called? How many? I would ask them what they wanted, and they would tell me, and I'd meet them somewhere in the projects and sell them the drugs. How many phones did you have at the time? I had 2 phones. Why did you have 2 phones? One to sell drugs off of, and just one phone to have it as a clean phone. What kind of phone was the phone you sold drugs off of? a Metro PCS phone. What did it look like? At that time, I had, it wasn't a flip phone. It was like a little throwaway Metro PCS phone. What about your clean phone? What kind of phone was that? An iPhone. Would you call DO on the phone during this time? Yes. Which phone would you use if you were going to call DO's dirty phone? I would use my dirty phone. Would you ever call his clean phone? Off of my clean phone, yeah. And why would you do that? So the phones don't ever cross lines. And if there was ever to get tapped or something, it won't go into my family phone that I call my family with. What do you mean by get tapped? Like if my dirty phone was tapped or whatever, I was selling drugs on, I wouldn't call his clean phone off of it, just in case they tapped his clean phone off of my dirty phone. So what was the purpose of that? Stay out of trouble and stay out of the police's way. Did JC have a specific phone for drug dealing? Yes. What kind of phone? He had a throwaway phone. What about Brabs? Yes. What kind of phone? The same thing, the throwaway phone. Did you ever use JC's phone? Yes. When would you use his phone? The same. If he was not in the neighborhood, he would leave me with his phone. Why would he leave you with his phone? So I can make money off of the customers on his phone. What about Brabs? Did you ever use his phone? Yes. When did you use his phone? The same thing. When he wasn't around in the neighborhood, he would let me borrow his phone. Now, when customers contacted these dirty phones, would they generally call or text? Call. Why would they call, to your knowledge? Because they wanted drugs. Did you ever say anything to customers about whether they should call or text? No. Did you ever let JC, Brabs, or DL use your phone? No. Why not? Because they was introducing me to their block, so they had all the customers, and they was just basically letting me get some of their customers. What do you mean by introducing me to their block? I was coming to their neighborhood to sell drugs, so they knew everybody there already. So they was basically putting me on and introducing me to the other people who buy crack in that neighborhood. So did you have more or less customers than D.O.? Less. What about JC? I had less. What about Brabs? Less. Do you know how long D.O. had been selling in Castle Hill? They just told me he was selling there for a while, maybe since before 2008. Do you know how long JC had been selling there? Around the same amount of time. What about Brabs? Around the same amount of time. Now, you testified that D.O. sometimes left you his phone. Do you know if he ever left his dirty phone with anybody else? Yes. What do you know? He used to leave it with this dude named Skrills. Who is Skrills? One of the blazers from Castle Hill. To your knowledge, would he ever leave his phone with somebody who wasn't in sex, money, murder? No. Mr. Lopez, I am now going to show you what has been marked for identification as Government Exhibit 302. Do you recognize this photograph? Yes. How do you recognize it? It's me, D.O., and J.C. Your Honor, the government would offer this subject to connection. Received. Ms. Corrado, can you please publish the photograph? Mr. Lopez, can you walk through who is in this photograph? Starting from the left, it's D.O. I'm in the middle, and J.C. Focusing on J.C. in this photograph here, what is he doing with his hand? He's throwing up sex, money, murder. What are you doing with your hands? I'm throwing up sex, money, murder. And what about D.O.? It looks like he's doing the same. Could you read the name at the top of this photograph? It says King Oski. What does that represent? That's D.O.'s Instagram. How do you know that's his Instagram? I had an Instagram too. We used to follow each other. Focusing on the text below the picture here, could you read what it says next to King Oski? It says, TBT, free my blazers, brothers, Stacks and JC. We wasn't chilling with none of our black friends this night. Spanish niggas only. Now turning first to TBT, what does that mean? Throwback Thursday. What does Free My Blazers, Brothers Stacks and JC mean? I was in prison at the time, and he was saying free me. What about JC? Where was he at the time? I believe he was locked up too. And what does the rest of this caption mean? That we was just chilling without none of our black friends that night? Where were you the night this picture was taken? It was in Sin City. Where had you been earlier that night? I was in Don Conquy in Queens. What is Don Conquy? It's another sort of club, restaurant. Who were you with at Don Conquy? Corey Brown and Drip. Who is Drip? He's another blazer. Somebody. He told me that he was one of CB's first drops. What does first drop mean? One of the first persons CB brought into Sex Money Murder. When did you meet Drip? I met him that night. What did you, Drip, and CB do that night? It was my birthday, and he invited me to Don Conquy. And I was with JC and D.O., and we went over there, but they didn't let JC and D.O. in because of what they were wearing. So I just went in for a few minutes, and I told them that I was leaving because they didn't let them in. And so we was going to go to Sin City, and he was going to meet us at Sin City. Did he do that? Yes. Turning back to your drug dealing in Castle Hill, did you ever talk to Brown about your drug dealing there? Yes. About how many times did you talk to him about it? Sometimes he would come pick me up from Castle Hill, and we would hang out, and he used to ask me what I was doing up there. I told him I was selling crack. How did he respond when you said that you were selling crack? He used to ask who I was selling crack with. I told him like D.O. and JC, and he just said, just be careful. But that's good that you getting money with the homies. But that's it. What did you understand him to mean when he says, that's good, you're getting money with the homies? I was making money with other people in the gang. Did you ever have crack when you got in the car with him? Yes. Where did you have it when you got in the car with him? I used to keep it in my boxer briefs. Do you know if he knew you had crack when you got into the car with him? Sometimes. Well, maybe. Not most of the time, but I always had it on me, so most of the time. I think you said sometimes he knew. How did you know that he knew then? I remember one time he asked me if I was dirty, and I told him yes. What did you understand it to mean when he asked if you were dirty? When I got in the car, if I had anything on me? Do you know why he was asking if you were dirty? Objection, Your Honor. Sustained as to form. Mr. Lopez, did you and Brown ever discuss whether he was dealing drugs in that time period? He told me he was on probation, so he wasn't selling drugs at the time. He was waiting till he got off. Now, Mr. Lopez, did Mr. Brown know how often you were dealing crack? Yes. How do you know that? I used to hang out with him a lot, and he knew I was selling crack at the time. Objection, Your Honor. Overruled. How, if at all, did your drug dealing relate to the gang? That's what the gang was about, making money. Were there any non-sex money murder members selling drugs in Castle Hill at the time? No. Could a rival of Sex Money Murder sell drugs in Castle Hill at the time? No. Why not? Because that was our neighborhood. If there were any disputes in drug dealing, how would they be resolved? Violence. If you had a problem in connection with your drug dealing, who would back you up? Any of the Blazers. Did you have any weapons to protect your drug dealing? Yes. What kind of weapons? A .357. Is this the gun you referred to earlier? Yes. Who shared this gun? Me, D.O., JC, and Brabs. Whose idea was it to get this gun? D.O. And when did he have that idea, approximately? We was just hanging out one day, and he knew somebody selling a gun, and we all chipped in to buy it. What did he say about knowing somebody selling a gun? He said that somebody was selling the .357 and that we didn't have no gun out there. And so we all put our money together. We all chipped in and bought the gun. Did he say why he thought you should get a gun? Just in case anything ever happened in Castle Hill while we were selling crack. How much did you chip in for the gun? I think I gave him about $100. Do you know how much it cost in total? I can't remember the exact. I think it was around 350. Where did you keep the gun? In the projects. Where in the projects? Certain people's houses when we was around. Just to be clear, which projects was the gun in? Castle Hill. Whose house did you keep it at? I remember keeping it at Skrill's house. Why did you keep it there? Because he was reliable and his building was close to where we used to hang out at. How close was the building to where you were doing your drug dealing? We was doing our drug dealing around the whole projects, but we used to hang out by his building by the benches.